Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. We are here today with a Kickstarter preview with Nick Little from Indie Boards and Cards to talk about Aeon's End Legacy this time.
A new Legacy game.
As you can see, we've got all sorts of little sticker packets all over the table.
So talk to us about this. What is new in Legacy for people that know about Aeon's End and people that don't know about Aeon's End? Just talk to us about it.
There's a lot new in Legacy. There's tons. And as you can see, we're showing you a lot of components, but not really showing you a lot that's in the components because we don't really want to spoil anything.
No, we're gonna try our hardest not to spoil anything. We'll probably ask a lot of questions that Nick will dodge.
Yeah, there's a few things that we'll show you just to wet your whistle, so be aware there are some spoilers, but it's nothing that you wouldn't learn after the first chapter or two, and if you're familiar with Aeon's End, you probably already know. We're not really going to give away too much of the narrative elements to it. And that's really the biggest change between Aeon's End and Aeon's End Legacy is with this campaign, we're able to introduce a lot more narrative, because in Aeon's End you just fought one guy and you sat down and maybe you read the back of his card to understand what has happened, what you knew about the boss, but there's no narrative interludes within the game at all.
So this is a complete storyline that takes place over, well, it appears to be 7 chapters, right?
Yeah.
And each of these chapters is going to introduce a new boss, I take it?
Yep, you'll fight a new boss after each chapter, or during each chapter.
Okay.
Your character will progress and level up through the game. You start the game as an apprentice mage, and you're all ready for your ordeal, and that's the big trial that you'll go through in order to become a breach mage. And everyone starts exactly the same. You're generic, you're a blank slate.
Okay.
And you read the prologue of the rulebook and you're all geared up, like you're introduced to a few of the characters from Aeon's End universe so that you know the context of the game and the storyline and you're teaching. And then in the first game, that's when, the mess happens. So basically this one boss here, Maelstrom, kind of shows up and he's wrecking house and all of a sudden you're thrown right into the fray. Mm-hmm. And your mentor Brahma is like, hey, this is all hands on deck. You try to handle the minions, and we'll try to handle Maelstrom. So, throughout that game against Maelstrom, there's a lot of narrative cards that come up that kind of introduce you to those mages that you were introduced to, but shows you them in action. Mm-hmm. And you're just trying to fend for yourself. You're grabbing whatever you can. And because you're new, like you don't have access to the same cards or powerful cards that you would had you played through Aeon's End. So a lot of the cards are kind of basic or not quite as powerful as the Aeon's End cards because you're apprentice mages. You got to learn how to use the tools that you're given. Because of that, and because how when we were looking and researching Legacy games, we found that Legacy games tend to open the audience to the games. We didn't think, let's make Aeon's End Legacy and everybody that owns Aeon's End will buy it. We thought a lot of people really like Legacy games. A lot of people, those people will buy it, but a lot of people just want Legacy games and they're willing to try the first Legacy deck builder to hit the market, Mm-hmm. And they're willing to try anything with Legacy on it, even if they haven't played Aeon's End. And some people, they heard the concept of Aeon's End, they wanted to play a campaign version and they might be holding out for this. So we scaled that first game based on the idea that you aren't very good, right? So your guys are pretty low quality, or they just don't have the skills that they would have. But also we use it as a sort of a tutorial game. So the cards are simpler, the boss is simpler, and you're getting your feet wet and you're trying to learn the game, and it serves really well as that experience.
But you can lose that first game, right? It's possible to lose it.
Yeah, it is not fully on rails. You do have to play well, and you do have to figure it out. And if you lose, that's fine. You're not stuck in a rut there. You make it out. You progress in the game. But
so what happens with failure? Do you have to redo the chapter again, or do you just progress from that point?
The first couple of chapters, you just move on.
Okay.
Because we don't want you to get stuck in a rut. We want you to progress in the storyline. Okay. And once you get to chapter 3, though, you have enough new tools in your market, and your character has leveled some, gained some experience. You have to replay the level. A few rules are tweaked to make it a little bit easier on you, so that maybe you win the second game. But basically, you would only play each chapter up to twice.
Okay.
On the narrative front, when our experience with the first Aeon's End, we knew there was a universe built behind it.
Sure.
Which probably didn't come out nearly as much as it will in Legacy, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned in the first sort of session, you're going to be introduced to some of those characters that we were somewhat familiar with. But even us, after playing that, like you said, you have to kind of want to read the back of the card and really invest yourself. There'll be a pretty significant story thread throughout this whole thing, right?
Yeah, there is a very significant narrative throughout the whole thing. But even And most of that's told within the legacy cards themselves.
Right.
You know, they're bumpers in and out of the story. But even within the games themselves, there are cards that'll come up that introduce you and have you read more narrative and have you dig a little bit deeper into either the boss and what the boss is doing, or the mages themselves and how you interact with those mages.
So as a legacy game, I mean, most people that play legacy games love the experience of upgrading stuff, of having a persistent world. What are you doing in Legacy, Aeon's in Legacy, that like changes your character or introduces new things to the course of the game? I'm seeing a ton of sticker sheets here.
Tons of stickers.
And then also the player boards look like they have room for a lot of
Yes, there
upgrades.
are. Yeah, when you see these pictures scrolling through here, so here's the first upgrade that you would get. You would unlock your unique starter card. In Aeon's End, every character has a unique starter card to them, and in this one, you would find the one that matches your mage, and then you would pick a sticker from the 8 available choices, and you would sticker it onto that card, and you would name it, and then you would write that on your player mat here. That's how you upgrade in the end of Chapter 1. So now everybody's already different because you have a different starting card in your hand. At the end of Chapter 2, we just go past it, but you're going to get an ability. And if you're familiar with Aeon's End, you 100% would have expected this to happen when you get this mat. There's a spot where the ability always is in Aeon's End, so you'd be like, oh, I bet I get an ability here. So I don't feel like I'm really ruining anything for anybody by saying.
Yeah.
I think given the fact that the first one happens after the tutorial, and
Right.
that second thing, like you said, is something if you played any Aeon's End you would
Right.
expect. I don't think that spoils anything.
And on the screen here, we're seeing also a lot of blacked out areas. These are upgrade cards or market cards that you can get that are available as you get further into the game.
Exactly. So at the end of every chapter, once you've finished the chapter, so if you lost the first game, you'll play it again, and then at the end of that game, you would upgrade your market, and you'll be presented with some choices, and you'll be able to swap 2 of those cards in for 2 of the cards that are in the market.
Oh, okay.
So there are some rules to there where you have to keep a certain amount of gems, relics, and spells, so you have a somewhat balanced market. But really, it's up to you how you want to go with the game and what strategies you want to employ. And that starts with the ways that the abilities you pick for your starter cards, the ability you pick for your mage, and realize that you're not doing it in a vacuum. You're not just trying to make your character the best character. You're going as a team. It's a fully co-op game, so
Right.
you need to make sure that you're picking the thing that's best for your team.
Yeah. One of the huge highlights for us when we played Aeon's End was the bosses themselves.
Yeah.
Have you guys really looked at the bosses this time and done some really cool things with them that have made them unique?
Yeah, so it's a little tough to go too far into
Sure.
with it, but there are the first boss is a little plain mechanically because like I said, you're introducing the game to him, but his one kind of key word that ties to him is this thing that triggers all of these narrative cards, like I said, that help you walk you through the battle in cinematic moments and introduce you to the different mages.
Okay.
And that's a new trigger word to the game, right?
Yeah, and it's that boss specific.
Yeah.
It's just called assist. It doesn't really mean anything if you don't know anything. So again, I'm not really spoiling much. But if you watch any run-through videos, you'll see it. And it just triggers you to draw a card and you read the narrative to it. The second boss, there's a new mechanic introduced in that chapter to the game. So we didn't go too complicated with him because you have to learn new rules to it. So that was an interesting thing that we learned while watching people play the game, is you don't want to introduce too much newness and complexity at once.
Right.
And we try to ramp you to Aeon's End as soon as possible, even though when I say that, I mean like the difficulty of base Aeon's End, because you start off without a unique starter card, without a unique ability, and we introduce some of those mechanics to get you're pretty much playing Aeon's End in Chapter 3, and even with a couple of new mechanics. So in Chapter 3, that boss has interesting mechanics to him that are different to any of the existing mages. There is a boss that you get to that has lasting legacy implications to the game. So you have to figure out how you want to mitigate these choices that he's making to you.
Nick's starting to flirt with.
Well, no, I
spoilery.
mean, to be honest, we talked off camera about a lot of these things,
Yeah.
and some of the aspects you're talking about here that you don't really want to get into are very cool, like the evolution of things that will follow you from one chapter to the next,
Right.
and through to the end of the game.
Right.
Very cool type of things that are going on with this.
I mean, that's-
especially for this type of game, right? This is the first real solid deck building game with a legacy component, right?
Yeah, that was our biggest struggle is when we sat down to make Legacy, because we wanted to make a campaign experience, and Kevin and I, it was kind of a co-design between the original designer and Kevin Riley, which I was the lead developer on. We sat down and we went, well, how is this going to be a Legacy game? Because we really wanted to jump at the opportunity to make it a Legacy game. They are very popular, but it's a very interesting design space.
Right.
And we sat down and we were like, well, how do we make one? Because like all of the ones that we had played or seen have a board, and Aeon's End does not have a board.
Yeah.
So it's like what carries over from game to game, and it's your character. And then there are a few other elements in the game that carry over from game to game. And we're like, all right, how do we put stickers on them? How do we write on them? How do we make it so that the choices you make now matter going forward?
Well, the other interesting thing too, and if you're watching this video, you're probably checking out the Kickstarter. It's a challenging thing to sell because there's so much you want to say, but you can't.
Right.
And trust us, we've gotten a peek, and there are some super cool things that happen in the game.
Yeah, there are so many things that I'm excited about. Like there would just be like weeks where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get this back to table to try and to play it and see how this works, because
It'll be fun too hearing players eventually reporting back online as they're experiencing it as well.
One of the cool things too is you told us that this game isn't finite. Like once you get through the 7 chapters and you've beaten it, you can replay the game.
Yep.
Also, it has some integration with the original Aeons in. Am I correct?
Yeah. Firstly, you will be selling a reset pack through the Kickstarter campaign. I don't know that it'll ever make it to retail. Kind of depends on the popularity of the game.
Sure.
But there will be a reset pack that'll allow you to basically rewind all the way back to the beginning and play it again. And you can buy any number of reset packs and reset it that way. The only thing that really holds over is we're not going to put a rule book in the reset pack, so the rule book stickers will stay in the rule book. But there's an instruction sheet with the reset pack that tells you when to basically unlock those. But yes, your other point was that you can integrate this with Aeon's End. You can't take Aeon's End cards or War Eternal cards and put them into Legacy and play the campaign. The balance would be way off. It would have been impossible to design it like that. But you can take something like 80 to 90% of this game and go play Aeon's End content with it. Especially you can take your mages that you have made and go and play Aeon's End with it.
That's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, you can also take all of the player cards in it, and almost all of the nemesis you can take and play Aeon's End with, and vice versa. So it's basically the same amount of content of if you bought Aeon's End and the Depths, and you wanted to add that amount to it.
How long have you guys been working on this?
We have been working on this for almost a year.
I think Legacy too, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of fans of Legacy these days, but especially with Aeon's End, with that rich story background,
Right.
I think it will be very appealing to the fans.
Yeah, like you said, it's really hard to really sell the game
Sure,
because you're like, I want to tell you everything because it's all so cool. But the amount of times that I sit down with a new group and I don't tell them anything and I just hand them the prototype and I say, go for it, and I'm going to watch, the amount of times they open something and their eyes light up, or they read a card and they're like, oh my gosh, did this really happen? And like,
That is one of the joys of these games. I mean, as soon as we got the box on the table today and Jeremy saw these sticker sheets, he wanted to grab them immediately because it's almost like a Pavlovian response now. When you see these sticker sheets with the dotted line, you're like, oh, I can't wait to play this game to find out what happens.
Yeah, and there are some very cool things out there that I found, so we'll talk about those. Nick, this looks really, really cool.
Yeah.
Super excited for this. This is Aeon's End Legacy coming out
February 13th.
February 13th.
is when the Kickstarter
On
launches.
Kickstarter.
Wow, that's soon.
It is very soon.
So if you guys have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Nick, you're going to answer them for us. we don't want to spoil too much.
Yeah, I'll be like, no comment.
If you guys like us, subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
This Kickstarter preview has been brought to you by Man vs. Meeple in sponsorship with Quartermaster Logistics. Take a look at all of their fulfillment solutions at qmlogistics.com.